Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How's
Hello.
everyone?
I'm good.
My name is Rachel. I'm going to be leading today's training session, and I'm just going to give it one more minute to let a couple more folks join. This is an open training session. All FutureFeed users are welcome to join this session. So there'll be a mix of different companies on the call today. Okay, so we got a couple more people who've joined. Thank you all for your time this afternoon. My name is Rachel Leidy. I'm going to be leading today's training session. Today's session is FutureFeed End User Training Session number 1. And you should be seeing my screen now, correct?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay, so this is, like I said, it's FutureFeed End User Training Session number 1. When you guys log into your FutureFeed environment, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a couple registration links. This first one here is for the training, so to register for any of our training sessions. Like I said, this is training 1. Next, you'll want to sign up for training session number 2. And you can sign up for these as many as as many times as you need. If you happen to be a service provider on the call and are providing consulting, then feel free to send all of your clients to this training. This is just like basic end user training, talks about how to use the tool and goes over our recommended approach for getting started with the tool and populating the data. The other link here, this 15 minutes with FutureFeed session, this is actually a 30-minute meeting with myself. It's an open office hours that I have. It's every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. And yeah, it's always a good session. Usually have like 20, 30 people join, and we start the session by just asking if anybody has any questions related to FutureFeed, if you have any issues with FutureFeed, maybe you need guidance or you're not sure if you're doing something the best way you should be in FutureFeed. We love those type of questions, and we just, I help figure things out and I answer those questions. But sometimes folks on the call, other users of FutureFeed, also have some good insight on how to use the tool. And then often we start talking about CMMC and NIST 800-171 and just the regulations in general. So this is a Thursday session, and you just have to register for it once, and then when you do register for it, then you'll have the invite, or you'll see the meeting every Thursday on your calendar, and then you could just join the weeks that you have questions or need help. Other educational material that you have available to you. When you're logged in, if you go to the top right of the corner user icon, there is the Help Center. Okay, so here is where we post all of our user guides, knowledge base articles, how-tos, and do sign in. Okay, as you saw when I came to this site, I was signed out. I haven't been here in a couple days. So you will have to make an account, use your FutureFeed, or use the same account information, at least the email that you use for FutureFeed. It's a free account. It's just we do not want publicly available to everyone some of our articles on our application because they're proprietary. So if you sign in, you'll have access to more articles, more information. Okay, so if you have questions, look there in the Help Center. Also all throughout the tool, we have built-in getting started guides or built-in user manuals. So you see this green getting started here. Right now we're in the compliance dashboard. So if I click on this, it's going to tell me all about the compliance dashboard. Not too much because it's just a basic little infograph. But if I go over, to here, there's getting started guides here for now I'm in the on-prem tools and service section. So it's going to give me more information about on-prem, what is on-prem, what kind of assets should you log. Same thing with documents, here documents. Okay, so all throughout FutureFeed, if you're in a page and you're not sure what, this field means or what you should be adding here, go take a look at these getting started guides and it should give you enough information to get started. And then the last thing is feel free to contact support@futurefeed.co. Okay. Email support@futurefeed.co with any questions, comments, concerns that you have, or if you have any recommendations for improvements to the user interface or the tool in general. The CEO, Mark Berman, loves to get those, so feel free to send those along. He reviews those directly. Okay, so let's get started. This session is being recorded, and about an hour after I end the call today, you'll get a link to the recording so you can watch it again if you'd like, or share it with other individuals in your company if you need to. I am going to be talking about the dashboard area today, start, people, tools, and documents. Okay. And then the second session, I cover assess, SSP, your FutureFeed poem and deliverables. So this first session, we're going to cover the first half of the tool, and then second session, the second half. And so this is just, you have available to you 2 1-hour training sessions. And how I approach the training or how I conduct the training is I follow our recommended approach for populating the tool. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly highlight what that is and tell you, you know, why I guess why I'm telling you this information. So, how the interface was designed, how they designed the tool is this start area is labeled start because we recommend that you start here in this area of FutureFeed and you start filling out this data. A lot of this data in here is high-level company information or just system information, but high level, and data inventory, and you could see some other stuff. So this is really starting to build out that top section of your system security plan. If you're familiar with a system security plan layout or a typical layout, usually the top portion is all about the system and the company and just high-level compliance management details. Okay, so here, start filling out that information. You're starting to populate your system security plan and define your boundary. Then you go over to people. Okay, so all throughout FutureFeed, you could assign responsibility or tasks or poem items or documents or tools to people, roles, or teams. So if you want to be able to assign your system administrator as responsible for a technical requirement in FutureFeed, you have to define that system administrator role and assign that person to the role. Okay, so in people, all you're doing is you're defining the users and the individuals that are involved with compliance management and defining the roles and defining the teams. So then, as you work on setting up the rest of the tool and you start assigning people responsible or accountable for something, you can call them out by team, by role, or by name. Okay, so that's what you're doing in people. So that's what we recommend doing next. First, start working on defining the company, then defining the people, the users, the teams, and then move on to tools and start identifying the technology that your company has, owns, manages, operates. Okay, um, in here, you're just defining IT product types or technology types, tool types, okay? So if you have 50 Windows 10 assets, you don't have to log in here Windows 10 50 times. You just log it once, unless they have a separate baseline image and maybe you log it twice because there's two different like images of Windows 10 that you guys use in your environment. So in the tools, start logging your technology. And then as you're logging your technology, and I'm going to go back over through all this in a little bit more detail here, but as you're logging your technology, try to tag people as responsible and accountable. Try to set these two flags here and go over into the connect field and start connecting that asset to the requirements. Okay, so this is a firewall asset. So there's certain requirements in NIST 800-171 that I am implementing by using this firewall, like the controlling inbound and outbound communication at my border. I'm using my firewall for. There's a requirement that talks about that, and using a denial permit by exception, ACL, for inbound outbound traffic. Like there's a requirement that speaks to that. So I'm using my firewall. I'm implementing those requirements on my firewall, and I'm using my firewall to implement those requirements in my environment. And so you're going to start connecting those requirements. You could search by keyword, or you could search by um, the actual ID number if you know it, okay? And then start connecting it. So what you're doing is you're making an association between this item and the requirements. And so over in the assess area, under the requirements, there is a section, there's several sections, which we'll get into in a little bit in the next session. But in here, you have two sections. This test section here, yeah, this test section, whenever you associate a piece of technology or a tool to a requirement, it shows up here. So there's my firewall, okay? And then over here, so whatever you add here under tools and you associate with the requirements, it's going to populate under this test. So you're building out, essentially think of it like you're building out your body of evidence. You're associating the tools you're using to implement the requirements and the documents you're using to implement the requirements with the requirements themselves, so you can build out that body of evidence, okay? So after you log all your tools and you get them connected to the requirements, then we would recommend going into the documents area and start logging all of your security documents. Okay, just hitting the add, logging all the policies, the procedures, the plans, the SOPs, whatever you have, the work orders, the workflow orders, all that stuff that your company currently has and utilizes, start logging them, okay? And then the same thing, open them up and try to get responsible assigned and accountable assigned, and then go to the connect field and start connecting it to the requirements, okay? So now I'm associating my documents to the requirements. I'm building out that body of evidence. And at the bare minimum, as you log your tools and as you log your documents, at the bare minimum, we recommend assigning someone responsible and accountable, and then connecting the entry to the requirements. Okay, you can go back through and start adding in all that metadata that you see here, and we'll cover this in a little bit. But you can go back through and start filling this out. But at the bare minimum, to get things started, we recommend the RACI responsibility and connecting them to the requirements. So then after you do that, when you go over into the assess area, you're going to be able to do almost an like another internal gap assessment. You've set yourself up to do another evaluation of where you're at currently as far as level of compliance. Because now you're going to start scrolling through the controls and the requirements and reviewing them. You're going to read the requirements and you're going to review these objectives to see if they're implemented. And down below under examine, you will have linked some documents. If your company had documents that related to that requirement during your connecting process, they would have been linked. Sometimes you'll miss things, but sometimes you know just connect what you see, and then down here you'll see your tools, and then you could start evaluating. Okay, so this objective here says something needs to be defined or identified, so I'm going to look in my policy to see if it's in there. And so you start doing your own evaluation in the assess area, and you mark things met if they're implemented, and you define how they're implemented. And then if things failed, they're not met, there's a gap, then you mark them not met, and you're going to put them on your system POAM. So then after you're done with the assess page, you move over into your SSP. And then by now you will have added people, tools, documents, you've had results for all of your requirements. So your system security plan, well, it's still going to have some gaps and there's still going to be some areas that are red and need to be filled out. It's going to be fairly accurate as far as the requirements and where they stand at, you know, right now, and just some high level information about the system. But you'll go back through and start filling in all those gaps and fixing those reds. Then the last step is your system POAM. Okay, so now you've done your little your gap assessment, and you've defined your compliance management that's currently in place, and you got some gaps, and so now you're going to start working within your system POAM or your FutureFeed subway stop here. This is all your non-compliance. This is everything that you need to work on, get compliant so you could be ready for that assessment. And in here, you have the ability to, you know, view all of the items individually or group them into projects, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the next session. So then under deliverables, you're just running reports, presentations. And so that's kind of, that is the FutureFeed recommended approach to filling out FutureFeed. Okay, so that's how I'm going to train it. I'm going to just go over the sections in that flow. However, I just want you to know you don't have to finish. You could see here under people, it's 66% complete. I don't have to finish this in order to move on to this section. So you can tackle it however you want to once you get comfortable and you start getting a feel for how all of the data interconnects. You could tackle it however you want to. And especially if you're a company and you're coming to FutureFeed and you already have a system security plan, maybe in a Word document, or you already have a POAM, you already have some results and you just want to start copying and pasting them in, you know, feel free to do that. Okay, so I digress, and I'm gonna go ahead and get started here. So shout if you have any questions along the way, or you can drop a question in the chat and I will answer it in a little bit. Okay, dashboard area. So here, when I log into my environment, this is my landing page, and just semi-interactive graph here. Like I can click on to the configuration management family and then drill down to the objective level to see status. And if there was an issue or whatever I wanted to learn more, I could jump straight to the requirements section in the assess page or your SSP, where it goes into more detail of how those objectives are being implemented and identifies the evidence. This assessment prep center. So FutureFeed, as you may have learned or have already, you know, heard me talk about, is there's a lot of sections in FutureFeed that are pulling data is being pulled from those sections to generate your system security plan. So it's very important that the information in your in your FutureFeed environment is accurate, especially those sections where they're feeding the SSP, because if they're inaccurate, then your system security plan, when you generate it, is going to be inaccurate as well. And your system security plan is a pretty important piece of your compliance management efforts, and during a C3PAO assessment, that really drives your assessment. So it needs to be accurate. Um, and, you know, other things like all throughout FutureFeed, you create poem items, and you manage poem entries, and you can close out information, and create other types of reports in FutureFeed. And so if that information is inaccurate in FutureFeed when you run those reports, or you're reviewing your poem, it's going to be inaccurate. So this here it lists all of the different pages of FutureFeed, and you can assign the different pages to someone. Like if I want my CEO to work on this company information section, or all these, very specific company, I could go in and assign it to them here. You could also quickly navigate to the page by clicking on the title of the section. So I'm going to go to contract manager page. So over here, this is already filled out, but you can clear it out after it's been logged. You could reset it for another round of review. So let's say this contract manager page, I'm going to assign this page to my contract officer at my company, or HR, or someone who's sales, like someone who's managing contracts and knows about the contracts. I don't know anything about them. And so I will assign this page to someone. Okay. Well, and then it's their responsibility to go in here and maybe fill out this data, or review it to make sure it's accurate, or maintain it. Maybe they do an annual review of the data. They can mark it reviewed. Whoever's logged in and marks this reviewed, their name gets captured. And you can even mark pages as approved and put your initials on them. Okay. And you saw how you can clear that out when you need to initiate another review process. And so if I go to now this tools page, you can see that none of this was impacted. So this compliance review box here directly relates to the assessment prep center listing here. These fields, see now that contract manager one, it was approved today by me, July 22nd. And here's how you reset all, or you can reset them individually as I showed you. This critical dates is just another project management tool. So if you are prepping for that C3PAO assessment, when do you start prepping? When do you plan on having that assessment? If you have any assessments, or if you had the assessment and you had any findings, you have to remediate those and get them revalidated within 180 days. So you're going to want to plan for that. When you earn your assessment, or your certification, it's good for 3 years, then you have to have another assessment in 3 years. And so when you need to start planning for that. So just another project management tool for your compliance, your certification effort. And then 2 sections here to review assignment of responsibility. Okay, like I said, all throughout FutureFeed, we're using RACI model and assigning tasks and poems. And so anything that's assigned to you as an individual, well, your account, because I can change who I want to see. If I want to see Nate's listing of responsibilities here, now I'm seeing his individual responsibilities, or I can go back to myself. And then all my RACI assignments, my tasks here, and my poem items get listed here. So you would want to make it a point to communicate to your team members that when they log into FutureFeed, check this responsibility dashboard, check their responsibility dashboard, so they can see everything that's assigned to them, everything they have working, and the due dates. And also up in the top right corner under your user settings, under subscription settings, you can enable, oh, not that one. Is it my account? My preferences? Okay, my preferences. So you can set up email notifications for new assignments or due or overdue tasks. Okay. Um, so if you set that up, then you can get some email alerts that you have some assignments due, and or you have a new task, and then when you log into FutureFeed, you can see everything together in one page here. And then you could click to the task directly to it and go address it. So that's the dashboard area. Compliance Prep Center, viewing responsibilities, graphic of compliance. And then this start area. So here's where you're going to start populating some data. You could see company information, it's pretty self-explanatory. We have a description here, place for your IT or cybersecurity budget, cybersecurity insurance if you have it. If you do, what does it cover and what are the coverage dates? Locations, here's where you're going to start defining your boundary. So if you have any physical locations in your compliance boundary that you have to apply the physical security at, you're going to log those locations. Just hit new location, define the information. The red is what you need, but populate what you can. And then open it up. It creates an inventory item. I like to think of these as folders, okay? Your tools are going to have these, and your documents are going to have these, and your locations have these. So whenever you make a record of a location, a document, or a tool in FutureFeed, it creates this inventory item or like this folder structure for it. And so now in here, you have a bunch of metadata you can capture, as well as think of these as like separate folders. So here I have a folder called evidence where I can upload any documentation, any evidence that I want to provide an assessor, or I want an assessor to see related to this location. Maybe like a floor plan layout or a layout of where the cameras are mounted or where the security systems are mounted, right? That kind of stuff. You can create tasks in here. Once you get your FutureFeed environments, built up, then you're going to start using FutureFeed to maintain compliance and track continued compliance. And so let's say at this location, you wanted to do, let's say an annual physical security internal audit. Okay. So you're going to create a task, annual physical security, what did I say? Audit. Be descriptive if you can in your tasks, because then people will do what you ask them to do the first time, hopefully. Assign it to your people. Remember, I said in the people area, you gotta define people, teams, and roles. Okay, so you'll have to do that before you get in to start assigning tasks, because if you want to find someone here, you'll have to have logged them in that people section. So I'm gonna, get this assigned to someone that makes sense if I have it, but I guess it doesn't matter. Let's do- Okay, and then I'm gonna make it repeat. I want this one to repeat yearly, and starting today on July 22nd, never ending, or I can make it end. And when the task is triggered, they have 7 days to finish that task, or let's give them a full 10 days. So they have 10 days to finish the physical audit and close out this task and log the evidence that it was completed. So I'm going to hit submit. And now Bart is responsible for doing this annual physical security audit at this headquarters location. And Bart's going to have a FutureFeed account. So when Bart gets a task or this task gets triggered, he's going to get a notification in his email, and he will log into FutureFeed and he'll see it on his dashboard, and he can go in here and close it out. And when you close out a task, it doesn't allow you to bypass evidence. So he will have to either attach that final report of his security audit, or maybe he documented his results, on SharePoint, and so linked to SharePoint. Or he can even draft up a new report here and actually type up a report, or copy and paste some results in here, drop a screenshot or something in here. Right? So let's say it's done, he's completed it, and now I'm gonna hit save and sign off that I've done that activity. So notice I was in tasks, 'cause that's where I created my task. And then now when I marked it complete, it kicked me over into the evidence. And here's my completed task. And then if I clicked on it, I'm going to see that report or whatever. If I would have uploaded a report or linked a report, you'd see that here. Instead, I just typed out, summary notes. And so, then this is evidence. This is all evidence that you're using, that you're following your policies, your procedures, your internal assessment processes, and an auditor is going to want to see that. And so here's where you would house that evidence, because the task is just going to keep getting triggered, and every time it gets complete, it's completed here, and the evidence is here. Okay, so some of this other stuff I'm going to go over a little bit more closely when we get to documents and tools. But closing out of that, in the locations, just start logging locations that store, process, or transmit FCI or CUI data. Maintenance and ownership. Here, you're just describing, again, you're still in that top portion of your SSP. So you're in, you're still describing your system at a high level and giving your assessor or anybody who's reading that SSP, just giving them a better idea of the environment. And so at a high level, describe who maintains and owns the hardware and software for the organization. And if you want an example of how I wrote it up here, I just copied and pasted what I wrote up here into the getting started guides under compliance implications. It's not pretty. We're working on fixing the code, the HTML, and making this prettier, but here's what we have so far. So here's where you could see an example of how you could write it up. Just talking about, what's leased, what you actually own, what's managed by vendors, what's vendor provide, external service provider provided, that kind of stuff. Under scope, again, just here defining the system. Please let me know if you have any questions as you see anything, or maybe you've seen something because you've been poking around in FutureFeed already. But just describing the system and the boundary of the system. I strongly feel that these are very important fields. Okay. So in my opinion, I am a lead CCA. I've also done compliance implementation and assessments for like 15 years now. Coming from 853 world. So these are pretty important descriptions, at least from the perspective of an assessor. Okay, they really need to understand your boundary. They're going to have that scoping call with you early on in your engagement with them, and you need to just be able to clearly identify what's in scope, what's out of scope, and so they can focus their assessment efforts on the right assets. So contracts here, I think we covered this. This is just where you're entering your cage code or cage codes. You can have as many as you need. Just hit enter, identify the highest level cage code, and then add your contracts here. Okay, so if you don't have a contract management system, a system of record for your contracts that you have in place and what clauses they have, utilize this section to however you want to. Some people like it. Some people have so many contracts that they don't like to log them in here because they already have a system in place to track those. So your call. But If you haven't done the whole scoping discussion yet and you're still trying to determine what is in scope, what systems need to meet NIST 800-171, that whole conversation always starts with, okay, what contracts you have and what data is being introduced into your environment through those contracts, and then let's follow that data wherever you're sharing it, sending it, storing it, emailing it, printing it, wherever you're doing with that, and after you get it, that's your boundary, that's your scope, that those assets need to meet 800-171. And so you could use this area to start that discussion too. Data inventory. You're identifying your FCI assets. This one is pretty easy, okay? Just to toggle yes or no. FCI assets down here is if I want to say yes, they have them, yes or no. So you do have to populate your tools area, because once you log your technology, then they'll show up down here, and then you come back here and you just toggle on yes or no if it's an FCI asset. For a CUIS, for your CUI inventory, it's a little bit different. So here we're listing out all of the NARA categories, and what you'll do is you'll just check the box on the one that you're working with. So this, let's pretend you're working with, I gotta go in here and clear these out one day. So let's pretend you're working with some budget CUI data for the DoD. You're handling some budgeting data for the government. Okay. So just check the box. That means somewhere in my environment, I am storing, processing, or transmitting CUI specified budget financial data. If you click on the link, it's going to bring you to the NARA website. Okay, this is good to know, because if you do actually, if you need to understand how to appropriately mark your CUI data, here's where you're going to learn how to do that. Okay, so you just click on the category. It's typical that a lot of folks in this industry are working with controlled technical information, right? These are those distribution statements, B through F. Okay, typically export controlled ITAR technical data. So this is how you would mark that if you're working with CTI data. Also, it's important to check here, because this is how you're knowing if you're going to find out if it's basic or specified. Okay, this one is a specified, and we all know this clause. This is the DFAR 7012 clause. So if you have CTI, it's always specified. It's never basic. So back here in this, I wouldn't have clicked any of these basic CTI, but this was a training testing environment, So what's budget? Budget is specified. Okay, so you're going to always pick the CUI specified here. Now, you could leave it like that, and it just tells anyone reading your SSP or looking at your FutureFeed environment that somewhere in this environment, this type of data is being stored, processed, transmitted. If you want to be a little bit more clear and paint that data flow diagram or that flow process, you can identify specific tools as storing, processing, or transmitting that data. So I'll show you real quick how that happens. Over under the tools, I gotta go to a tool that's a CUI asset. And so I think this one is category, yeah, CUI asset. So, and then if it's categorized as CUI asset, I can click on the CUI icon and further identify the type of CUI in that asset. So let's say we click that budget one here. Now, when I go back to my data inventory, my overall data inventory, which collects that information from all my assets, then I'm going to see that for budget financial, it is being stored, processed, or transmitted in my JIRA system. Okay. So you can get granular with it, and you can list out as many assets as you want if you want to use that, or leave it. It's up to you if you just want to leave check in the box. The sensitive data up here. So this is for if you have proprietary business information, confidential information. Maybe you have some other data in your environment like employee PII or HIPAA data that you want to track. Any other data that's not FCI or CUI, you can create new categories, or you can use some of these proprietary business and provisional information over here if you want. But it's just other data other than FCI and CUI that your company is interested in protecting and identifying as being stored, processed, and transmitted in this environment for maybe some other regulations or something.
So in this area, or well, really any area, I think it'd probably be in this area based upon what you're explaining. Is there some area like I'm going to be mapping our TSAX controls in alignment with the CUI when we get to that so we can kind of look at it all together? Would we be able to add a field or do that anywhere within FutureFeed?
Um, I'm not sure what the TSAT control. Did you say TSAT controls?
They're TSAX, what it is, it's related to the automotive industry. And if it's
Okay.
in CUI and it's something that's being leveraged within, CMMC, I was going to try and map the TSAX to the specific controls just to make it easier for our internal team.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if we could add something in here per se.
No, you won't be able to link these data if you identified TSACs as data or controls here. It's not going to link to the requirements.
Okay.
We are adding in other frameworks. So, for example, this training environment I'm in is also subscribed to 853 and then 171 Rev 3. And so, if that whole TSAX, if that's an automotive control requirement listing, you could request that that gets added into FutureFeed, and then you could toggle between the two different sets of requirements and you could map the requirements to each other.
Okay. Thank you. That was helpful.
Yep. All right. And then the setting area you have just you can um enable or integrate FutureFeed with your local ticketing system. You could see here just support at futurefeed.co. That's how you create a ticket with our ticketing system. Um and a tip here is that you could put anybody's email in here. So if you had maybe some C-suite folks or your CEO or just other personnel in a compliance management role who didn't necessarily want access to FutureFeed, but they want to, stay updated as far as POEM items and POEM projects, then you could put their email in here, or maybe make a shared email, shared inbox, and have a bunch of people access it. So just a little tip. But here, if you have this enabled, then where you see this ability is in a few different places, but I'll just show you what the icon looks like. It is here, this little envelope. So right now I'm in my system POEM and I could send a email directly to my ticketing system on this POEM here and then even make some notes if I needed to and hit send. So my ticketing system can say synced, or maybe I want to just send updates externally to a shared inbox. Okay, POEM in FutureFeed, when you create a POEM, it's going to be pre-populated with a default due date, and you can change that POEM at any time. You can change that date at any time, but it will be pre-populated. So here's how you control that. If I make a POEM entry today, it's going to be due for me 3/4 out. And down here, okay, so real quickly, in your system POEM area, when you're starting to work on remediating system flaws or vulnerabilities or any non-compliance, for all of your POEMs, you can identify impact, effort, and cost. And you can also identify impact, effort, and cost at the project level. And so if if you're working with a pretty big team and let's say your system admin makes a POEM entry in FutureFeed and you yourself make a POEM entry in FutureFeed, you want to make sure that everyone in your team who's making POEM entries is speaking the same language when it comes to impact, effort, and cost. So that way, when you end up prioritizing items based on impact, effort, and cost, and some risk, then you can rely on what was set by that other person, because you've defined the scale, you've defined the language, you defined the scale for your company. And so a low income, a low cost poem item for me is $500, versus if I was a big company, maybe a low cost poem item for me is $3,000. Okay, so define the scale, and then anybody who's responsible for poem creation or management or prioritization of activity will want to understand and have this set so everything is accurately weighed in your analysis. Okay, framework, you can disable the FedRAMP warning that pops up. You have to be an admin to do it, and I would only recommend doing it if you don't have any FedRAMP requirements for your organization. So that's the start. Okay, so now people, you're defining users, roles, and teams. Okay, and in here you have to be an admin to add new users. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to work with your FutureFeed admin, maybe give them a list. You might have to make a whole list of all of the accounts that you want created in here, or all of the people you want logged in here. But under users, that's what you're doing. You can make accounts, either standard accounts, admin accounts, or assessor accounts, or you can just log people in FutureFeed and they don't have access to it, but you log them because you want to be able to, tag them as responsible by name, or maybe assign them a role, by name. And so you want to log them as a record in FutureFeed, but they don't need access to FutureFeed. So you might want to work with people, compile a list of all of the people that you want to have access to FutureFeed, and all of the people you want to at least be identified in FutureFeed, so you can identify them in a RACI model somewhere. As far as who to give access and who not to give access, it's obviously completely your call, but just know that in FutureFeed, as you saw with the task feature and the alert feature, and there's poem features, and there's a lot of communication. We have a chat room up here. And so if you want to be able to track that communication, log that communication, or do everything within the FutureFeed dashboard, just, maybe consider giving them access so that way they can use that. Otherwise, if you assign somebody something and they don't have access to FutureFeed, you're going to have to communicate that assignment outside of FutureFeed. Okay, so here the admin needs to create all those users, either log them or create their account, and then start defining the security roles. You have some default ones here, and if you don't want to use them, just mark them not applicable. And then you could start defining your own. Just hit add new, define the role, okay? And then go find the role and put the person in the role, okay? So here, just think of all those roles that are involved with compliance management, or implementing, or ensuring things get implemented. That's who you're going to want to define here. This default accountable role. Okay, so like I said, all throughout FutureFeed, and as I showed you, we're using the RACI model. The A in RACI stands for accountable. So here you can assign someone the default accountable, and everywhere the RACI model is used, this role will be a default accountable role. So I would consider and recommend setting this just so you have someone assigned that A objective in the RACI model all throughout by default, and you can always change it after you create an item. You can always change it. Over here, teams. So start building out your teams that you want to assign as responsible for poems and requirements and tools and documents. This populate button here, what we've done is we've pre-built teams. Okay, so if you have an HR team, here's what we recommend. If you want to pre-build this team, you just click the box, okay? And so once you do that, then this HR team, and I'm talking about that one, I just can't click the box, but this HR team is associated with these three controls. And this is just based on typical implementation that we see, but typically HR is providing that training or making sure that training gets done in the onboarding process, right? If you have a physical security team, even if you don't have a physical security team, but let's say you just have one guy and he's going to be responsible for physical security, you could still use this team by clicking the box, check the box, and use it, and it's going to be pre-associated with these 6 controls that talk about, something. There's physical security requirements in these 6 controls. Okay, so you could still create the team and just go down, find the team, and add one person to the team. You don't need a bunch of people on your team. But now any member of the team is going to see, this is the HR team. All 3 of these people are going to be assigned as responsible in the RACI matrix for those 3 awareness and training requirements. Okay, so if you want to use the populate function to build out teams that are already associated with the requirements, then that's what this capability is doing here. So after people, then tools. Okay, so real quick, under tools and under documents, I'm going to talk to these 2 pages at the same time because it's very similar layout. So under tools here, you just have a bunch of subcategories of tools and a couple other areas I'll show you. Under documents, you just have a bunch of subcategories of documents. Okay, so make sure you're in the right subcategory of wherever you want to be. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna log a on-prem tool. I'm gonna make sure I'm in the on-prem area and just type out the mission. So mission, we're saying, what is the purpose of that tool? What's the goal of that tool? And so like SIEM, a SIEM solution, or MFA, or firewall, or a user endpoint, those are all, the mission. Printer, and then give the exact model. So if I was doing, firewall, then what is my firewall? Cisco, yada, yada, yada. So type it out and then hit add. And what you do then is you're making an entry like this. You're creating that whole folder structure for that item. And then you'll open it up. And like I said, try to get the responsible assigned, get the accountable assigned, work on connecting the requirements. You just hit connect, search the requirements. You can search by ID number or word. Okay. And it changes the depth of your search. So here I'm searching at the control and the control description level. Here I'm searching at the objective level. And here I'm searching at the whole guidance level. Okay. So search for keywords if you need to, and start tagging the requirements. Compliance here. So under your assets, you have this compliance tab. So you're going to categorize this asset. That's an important process. What is this? This is a security protection asset? Is it public facing? Does it have FCI, PII, PHI? Is it sensitive data? Other flags you can set for it. But the categorization process is important. Tasks, you could see just some examples like, oh, I need a screenshot. So I created a task so someone can get me a screenshot of a firewall setting, or, I created a task so they can implement the limit of login attempts, because it needed to be implemented. Here's another task. So think of tasks, create tasks for anything that you need to get done initially to get compliant. But then once you get compliant, set up tasks that are going to help you remain compliant and help get that stuff that needs to happen throughout the year triggered and happening. And then you have that evidence folder. So over here, under tools and documents, just know that you have 2 sections. There's this active section, and then down here we have pending. Same thing with the documents. We have active and pending. Okay. So active means that's technology that's already in production and it's already being utilized. It's being implemented today. Or it's a document that's already approved and it's implemented, enforced, and followed today. Pending just means, as far as a document, it's in draft. We're still working on it. It's being developed. a pending tool entry would be some technology that you're planning to acquire in the future to try to meet the requirements, maybe, or just expand your boundary. Maybe you're going to plan to migrate to GCC High, and so you could log that here. And when you do log things down in this pending category, just by hitting log and defining what it is. Now, when I hit log, I've just created, not only did I create a whole inventory item for that document now, like I'm showing you here, but I have created it and put it on my system POAM, and it has a due date of June 29th. And if you accidentally create things, like if you created something up here and it's not active, it's still in draft, just go ahead and open it and you can change up the status here. And I'm going to put it on my POAM. I can either do dates or quarters, set a due date. And now I've just put my incident response plan on my POAM for whatever reason, and changed that. It's no longer up here. It's going to be down here. Okay. So under the tools and documents, just start logging the technology and the documents, assign responsibility, get them set up and tagged to the requirements. And when you have time, just start working on filling all that other metadata and seeing some of the other fields and maybe if you want to utilize them. Real quickly, I want to show you something for one thing. Let's do this risk analysis procedure thing that I just created. So under connect here, I want to talk to you briefly about this leader follower. So we have the ability to connect the controls to this document right here. Okay. Or even right here. Or so I can connect things that way. Or if I establish any leaders to this item, then what happens is the connections that leader has will trickle down and be connections for this document. So, for example, I know I already created a risk management policy. So if I go find my policy, my risk management policy here, and I link it, it's connected to 14 requirements. And now this procedure has now been connected to those 14 requirements, okay? They're in controls inherited from the leader. And so now under these requirements, all of them, I'm going to see my risk analysis procedure document as a piece of evidence under those requirements in that assess field and under that section. And maybe I wanted to do that, maybe because that makes sense. And so, but if I didn't want to do that, but I still wanted to make a connection between my risk policy and my risk procedure, but I didn't want to have all those controls be pulled over, I can make it a follower. It's still connected, so that way if anybody needs to find all these documents, they're logically connected together. And if I'm working doing my risk analysis and I have a question, I can look at my procedure. If I still have more questions, I can look at my policy because now it's connected here. But you see how when I connected the risk management policy as a follower, it didn't pull over all those other, I don't know, 12, 11, 12, 13, 14 controls that there was. And so now I've not impacted or affected my control tagging. Okay, so it's just meant to help manage your tags, or, think about when you have a policy and you end up connecting that policy document to all the requirements, right? And then that policy usually has a procedure, and then you end up connecting that procedure to all those requirements. And then that procedure, it may have a form or a checklist, or some sort of after action report template, right? So then you're going to connect that document to all the requirements. And so instead of connecting the requirements 3 times, you could just connect it to the policy and then connect those other the procedures and the checklists and all those other supplemental documents, connect them to the policy, and then all of the controls trickle down and everything's connected and stays connected together in your body of evidence. Okay? And that's where we're stopping today. So I will open up the floor for any questions. But before I do, I'm going to stop sharing quick. And then just know that, so what I recommend for you to do is start working on the start area, populating that information. Go to people, log your users, your roles, your teams. Go to tools, start logging your technology and connecting it to the requirements. Documents, start logging your documents, connecting it to the requirements, and then you'll be set up to do an assessment. And so when you're ready to do an assessment, feel free to schedule with me for that second training, end user session number 2, where we talk about doing an assessment and how to document that in FutureFeed, and how to review, approve your POAM and your SSP and other stuff. So does anyone have any questions? None? Perfect. Well, then I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Definitely sign up for that Thursday session. It's always a great conversation in there. And yeah, I'll look forward to seeing you all in the next training session.
And how can we sign up for that Thursday session?
Yes, so I'm not sure. Am I still staring? Did I stop sharing my screen, or can you see it?
I just see you.
Okay. So log into FutureFeed and then scroll to the bottom of Future.
Okay.
So you log into FutureFeed and then scroll to the way bottom, and there's 2
Oh, I
links.
see it. 15
It's
minutes
the
with
second
FutureFeed.
one.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. All right. Bye. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Rachel.